Hello everybody, Adam Cleary from FourFourTwo here. We are yet again in the midst of an international break, which means there's all going on right now. So it's time for another... Anyway, yes, hello. Now, hardcores on the channel may remember we did one of these for Mourinho's Chelsea not very long ago, and we asked if we ever did this again, because obviously we were going to do this again, what team would you like to see? And the overwhelming answer we got by a million bajillion squillion miles was Arsenal's Invincibles. One person did ask for Alan Pardew's bananas Newcastle United side, and I will do that one day, just probably in the pub. Now, one thing I want to point out right at the start, okay, is that obviously this is what everybody thinks Arsenal's Invincibles were, right? That is the 11. There's no disputing any of those players. But just to prove we've really done our research here at FourFourTwo, this 11 was only fielded by Arsene Wenger that season twice. I know, that's absolutely bananas, isn't it? But they also had Martin Keown, they had Gael Clichy, they had Edu, they had Ray Parlour, they had Jeremy Aliadier, my favourite name in football ever, Jose Antonio Reyes, and Sylvain Wiltord. But were you to give Arsene Wenger a live microphone on a big stage and say, please sing the true song of your Invincibles heart, this would be the lyrics. These were the 11 players he always had in mind. The others just filled in as like for like. And obviously the reason I'm telling you this is because we're going to proceed with the video as if this was the 11 every single week. Even though it wasn't, but it did definitely feel like it was. Alright, so anyway, the stuff you're actually here for. This was the Arsenal Invincible squad. Wink, it was a 4-4-2 in theory, but this being the turn of the millennium, 4-4-2 was slightly starting to get on the way out. We were just a couple years away from Mourinho coming in and almost killing it completely, and Wenger, ever the innovator, had made several adjustments to it. So primarily you had Dennis Bergkamp here, who never really played like an out-and-out striker, was always in the pocket, was always off Henry, was always trying to be in this gap between the midfield and the defence of both his own team and the opposition team. Thierry Henry did like to float out to both flanks, primarily the left one. He did loads of his good work there, but would usually have to stay central because the two wide players, Ljungberg and Pires, would push really far forward. You combine that with the fact that both Gilberto and Vieira would look to get forward, but only very late on in moves. They were usually quite deep, and yes, well observed, this is actually more of a 4-2-3-1. But the thing is, while this is obviously quite innovative for the time, it's not something that worked because it was really, really clever and Wenger had found some magic formula to beat other teams in the league. It's a system that worked because of the way it was executed. One of the main advantages of playing 4-4-2, and something Arsenal still had even in this sort of 4-2-3-1 shape, is that you get pairs all over the pitch. So 2 centre-backs, 2 wide players, 2 central midfielders, 2 attackers. So no matter what you're doing as a player, there's always somebody who should be near you. But as well as those pairs, and this is going to start sounding like some bad GCSE revision video right now, right, is that Arsene Wenger also added loads of triangles. And he did that by basically staggering the entire core of the team, because Bergkamp would obviously drop off, but he would favour the right-hand side while Henry would stay forward, but favour the left. Patrick Vieira would usually hold a very central position, but Gilberto Silva had no problems dropping out of that space to sort of receive the ball off the defence. And then in Sol Campbell, you've got a really great conventional central defender, but in Kolo Touré, a converted midfielder, you had someone who liked to bring the ball forward. And as massively oversimplistic as this explanation is for it, all of a sudden, look, you've got these little triangles all through the centre of the pitch, where normally under a 4-4-2, you'd have players on the exact same line. Now, just imagine for a second you're playing against a team that does this, and you are using a 4-4-2, and it's just absolute bedlam for you. Like, who would deal with Dennis Bergkamp here? Would you want one of your central midfielders to drop onto him, leaving his pal completely outnumbered in the middle, or should one of the centre-backs push forward and allow Henry to run into the space he leaves? And likewise, when Touré is bringing that ball out from the back, does one of your midfielders then press onto him in that space? Because you're going to be leaving your pal, not just with both of these midfielders to deal with, but remember Bergkamp's dropping in as well, so it's a 3-on-1, or do you stay there and just let him have the ball? It's so difficult to work out what to do across 90 minutes. And what this commitment to finding space between the lines allowed Arsenal to be was a really direct, quick side. Like, it does kind of bug me a little bit that Arsene Wenger's now got this reputation for just building sides of little passing nerds who want possession for possession's sake, because this is not what this team was at all. Like, they didn't really have that much more of the ball across 90 minutes than most of the teams they were playing. What they wanted to do was pull defenders out of position to allow any of their forward line, all of which blessed with incredible pace, to break into that space. Like, if you just think back to the best goals scored by the Invincibles over this season, how many times in your head can you see either Henry or Pires or Ljungberg running at a back four or running into the space behind them and scoring a goal that way? Like, that was their bread and butter. Move you up the field, move you out of position, and then get in quickly. And also, right, for all this is like an early version of a 4-2-3-1, Arsenal sort of had an early version of a high press as well. Like, do you know how your dad always says, oh, it was just called closing down in my day? Well, it was just closing down, but it was structured closing down. Now, what Arsenal would do when they didn't have the ball is the two wide players, they would drop back to form like a really conventional two banks of four, like the good old days. The defence would push up, leaving quite a high line. And then Bergkamp and Henry, their job was to press/close down the centre-backs, not very aggressively, but just to let them know they're there, and force them to put the ball out wide to the fullbacks. Now, because Arsenal are simultaneously very compact, but also very high, and theoretically, Bergkamp and Henry have shut down the options to get it back to the central defenders, doesn't really leave the fullback there with all too many options, but they can see a load of space in behind, so they're trying to tempt them to hit it long into that space. Now, and you know, not to show off or anything, but 442's own Mark White spoke to some of the Invincibles for a massive feature on them in the next issue of the mag. Look out for that. He told us specifically about this system. When you play with such an attacking team, you have to have such speed at the back. That's what Arsene Wenger did. Sol and myself were fast, we had power, we were able to defend high lines, and we could pin teams in with our quality. And that was exactly the plan, because in Lauren, Campbell, Toure, and Cole, you had four incredibly fast defenders who, if the ball did go over the top, could beat most forwards in a race to chase it back. But also, the reason they went and got in Jens Lehmann was because for the time, he was a very sort of, I don't want to say innovative again, but sort of innovative sweeper keeper. He would come out and close that space down. And lo, if you can't play through them, because, I mean, Christ, that's Gilberto Silva and Patrick Vieira there, and you can't play over the top because the defenders are really fast and the goalkeeper's going to sweep up, doesn't really leave you with many ways of breaking them down. And they don't get anywhere near enough credit for how good defensively they were that season. Check this, I'm going to guess. I think they conceded like 26 goals in the league? I'm going to check that. 26? What's 26? What, I doubt myself? 26 goals. That's really good. This is why I said at the start that understanding the Invincibles is not about some clever system that Wenger stumbled upon. It's all in the execution. Because while this is a system based around finding the space between the lines and dropping out of your own position to do so, it's being executed by a group of players almost perfectly assembled to be like naturally inclined to do positional rotations with their teammates. What do I mean by that? Well, think about it this way. You've got Dennis Bergkamp, who loves to drop away from the forward line on the right-hand side, but you've also got Freddie Ljungberg, who just adores to receive the ball in that sort of right-hand half space, confusing the central defender and the fullback as to who should be marking him. You've got Thierry Henry, who loves to go all the way over to the left-hand side to receive the ball and be set for a counter-attack, but you've also got Robert Pires, who loves to drift into the centre and loves to just go at goal himself. And then when Pires does find himself coming in field, you've got young Ashley Cole here, who adores to bomb up the left-hand side. There he goes, falling off the table, because he used to be a striker. To get that back. You've got Vieira and Toure, who both like to break forward from their position, either carrying the ball or making late runs into the box, but they're ably supported by Gilberto Silva and Sol Campbell. Two men with sort of the spatial awareness and the heft to cover that space all on their own. Now, more than anything on this entire earth, I want to pay special attention to this forward quartet, because I would argue, or at least in my opinion, I think they are the best collection of four attackers ever in the Premier League. Like, yes, but I know there's arguments for loads of other different groups like York, Cole, Giggs, Beckham. They were obviously really good. Mane, Salah, Firmino, probably the best in the modern age. Duncan Ferguson, and just the really angry voices in his head. You could say loads. But for me, just the pace, the inventiveness, the incisiveness, the creativity, the fluidity, everything between these four, I think is just worth talking about. Because as we've already talked about, this Arsenal side was built around dropping out of your position, finding space, and having players who were naturally able to fill into it. And it was just lethal the way it was organised between these four. And it all starts and ends with Thierry Henry. Teams were absolutely terrified of him, and there was 7 or 8 different ways he could effectively score a goal against you. Like, in its most basic sense, imagine you are marking Thierry Henry and he pulls away from you and drops sort of into the space behind the midfield. Like, do you go with him? Because if you do, he might get the ball and just literally sprint past you and score a goal. But if you don't go with him, he'll just crack in a shit pinger from about 30 yards. He loved to drift wide of the defenders and either receive the ball and drive directly at goal, or receive a pass in behind them and dart diagonally. And whenever his movement did create space for a teammate, they were more than happy to fill it. It was just impossible to work out what to do. I think, honestly, and maybe I'm getting slightly carried away with this, I think Thierry Henry might have been the first centre-forward in the Premier League ever who could just score every kind of goal. Anyway, though, for one entire Premier League season, just this creativity and this fluidity in attack, this sort of robustness in the centre of the pitch, and this sort of structural ingenuity that allowed them to play forward, and just every single element of this team that Wenger had designed worked perfectly. And it worked perfectly for 38 games. You couldn't get beat. Now, just one final little point before I go, okay? You do get a lot of people trying to talk down the achievement of going unbeaten in a Premier League season. Like, obviously, yes, they were not the first team to do it. Shout out my boys, Preston North End in like 1889-90 or 99-80 or whenever it was. They obviously did it first, and they did get knocked out of all the cup competitions, and they did draw like 12 games as well. But there is a reason why you did not see this for over 100 years, and you have not seen it in the 20 since. So many tiny little individual things have to happen at once here. Like, Jens Lehmann had just arrived, but he hit the ground running straight away. There was no bedding in period for him. All the really key players were getting into peak points of their career at the same time and stayed largely injury free. Every single week, Arsene Wenger had to sit down and analyse their upcoming opponents and make certain adjustments, and he never got it badly wrong even once that season. Like, that's all it would have taken, just, getting their marking disorganised at a corner. Oh, back post, 1-0. Oh no, we're not going to be invincible anymore. Happens to every single team, no matter how good they are. But for 38 game weeks, it did not happen here. Like, they were really frugal at the back. They were unbelievable to watch going forward. They set up in a 4-4-2, so they represented all those best bits of that British footballing mainstay, but they also innovated it in ways that would change how a lot of other teams set up in the future. They were the perfect balance of just everything. And we will leave it there. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, I will say this is not the kind of thing that the algorithm on YouTube usually likes, but we have a whole heap of fun doing it. So if you have enjoyed this, please do consider sharing it around and sending it to your friends and just giving us a little extra push than we might normally get. That would be really, really helpful. It would make me do this. And also, hey, while you're here, please do consider subscribing to the channel, because we do normally cover the latest in what's going on, but when nothing is going on, we do this little fun stuff as well. And not just for Arsenal, of course, for all the clubs. Can you hear my voice going? I can hear my voice going, so I'm going to wrap up even quicker than I normally would. You can get me on all the socials at Adam Cleary, CLERY. Just joined TikTok, don't know why. The latest issue of the mag is not upside down, it is right here. Trent Alexander-Arnold is on the cover, but the new issue is coming very soon and includes a massive piece, not just by myself tactically, but from the entire team about the Invincibles, cause we think they're mint. Right, yes, that is it. I do need to throw a tweet now, so I'm going to go. Love you, bye. That'll do.